I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Well, hi everyone. It's TGU time from VLGA Connect. Great to have you with us for another week of dissecting the news from around the local government sector. And with their scalpels at the ready, I have Julie Reid. Hello, Julie.
Hello, Chris. Hi, Tony.
And Tony Rownick. Hello, Tony.
Hey, Julie and Chris. It's been a busy week. Johnny Cash had that song, I've Been Everywhere. Was that
You've been all around the state, I hear, Tony.
I feel like a bit like Johnny Cash this week, having been everywhere, but really busy week. Enjoyed. Started at Gannawarra in Kerrang this week, and then did some online sessions with Corangamite and Whittlesea council officers this week, and then back on the road up towards the Murray again yesterday. Was at the LG Pro Director CEO Forum in Echuca, which had a great turnout and some fabulous speakers as well.
Wow, you have been racking up the kilometres. You've been out there in the Hunt and Hunt tour bus as you're doing
in the old ancient Tony Mercedes, which is it's getting very close to clocking up 200,000. So I'm waiting for that with excitement. But yeah, it's a little bit kangaroo damaged would be the word. You have a little kangaroo bounced off the front end of it somewhere out of Newstead recently, but yeah, it's got sentimental value. It was in my daughter's weddings, that car, so I'm not getting rid of that.
There you go. And Tony, you were saying you caught up with a few people, particularly at that LG Pro Forum, and people telling you that they've been watching or listening to TGU in weird places.
In all sorts of weird places. Let's just say in the car is probably the one I can talk about, but listening to us in the car. But some great speakers. I was lucky enough to get up and have a speak about preparing for the 2024 elections and what councils need to be sort of contemplating now. But Phil Cantillon, the CEO at Frankston Council, joined me and gave us a great, related the experience at Frankston with some of those activist community groups, which seem to sort of have, it's an epicenter for that there at Frankston. And Phil had some great stories about what council had been doing there to, accommodate those arrangements in a way that is sort of looking after the community. Also had Josh Lewis, who's the acting CEO at Moira talking about just that enormous experience for the whole council community there, the staff, and what he was doing as the acting CEO in terms of working with the administrators now and really that process of recovery, working on culture improvements within the council following that report. And Matthew Hyde, the CEO of Wodonga Council, was able to also relate, some learnings from the recent monitor experience, and also their observations and learnings being adjacent to Moira and watching Moira go through that experience. And finally, my colleague Kate Oliver from Maddox spoke on ESG in the council context. And so well done to Jill Brown, the CEO there. Sue Wilkinson stepped in as the chair, the vice president of LG Pro, and of course the CEO at Yarra. And I believe Karen Ellis also chaired a CEO forum in the afternoon with Sue.
It sounds like it was well worth being there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go because we had a global panel for VLGA and LGIU online late yesterday, which was terrific, and members could look out if you weren't able to attend for the recording of that in the coming days. All right, let's get to the news. You mentioned Matthew Hyde. That's just reminded me, Tony. Matthew, of course, came from Snowy Valleys in New South Wales last year. Because of the potential for a demerger, which is still playing out, they appointed an interim, well, not an interim, but they appointed a GM for a 12-month term around last October. That GM's resigned this week, and finishing in the first week of August, so won't even see the 12 months out. So there's a bit happening in Snowy Valleys at the moment. But we digress. Let's get to our list of news, and the big one that's attracted certainly my attention and that of a lot of others this week is out of Hobsons Bay. And Julie, with your planning background, I'll be really interested to get your take on this. What's emerged is that there's been this community of people living in what's termed an industrial estate. It's not zoned for residential use. The units in there have been bought and sold numerous times, apparently over about a 30-year period, when the zoning doesn't actually allow for that residential use. And now, for some reason, it's come to the attention of the authorities, and those residents have been given notice that they need to vacate. And of course, that's become a very emotive issue and attracted a lot of media attention here. I'm not sure who wants to go first, but I'm interested in, what are the legal triggers or the planning triggers that would be behind this action?
Chris, yeah, look, it's interesting that the land is actually zoned industrial, and it's not a quick fix just to change the zoning of the land. And that's what the council is effectively saying, is that, there is a process that they would need to go through. But they are saying in this situation that they don't believe that they would get the support of the state government in rezoning that land to residential because of the location of it. Because in actual fact, this Techno Park Drive is right next to Mobile's fuel storage sites. Now, I believe that site has not been used for that purpose for some time. And I think Mobile are sort of having a think about what the future of that site will be. But it's a sensitive site, but it's just an incredibly interesting situation. And I think that probably this has happened before, from what I recall. And I think that the councils such as Yarra might have gone through this previously, and it might even be that Hobsons Bay have been through this before as well. I'm not sure. But the land is zoned industrial. They would have to get the land rezoned. Potentially there is a long process to go through that, and they would need the support of the state. Now, it's interesting that the state in their comments back to this particular issue are saying it's a matter for the council.
Yeah.
Now, I just find that incredible, because it is not a matter for the council alone. A rezoning requires the support of the minister to commence, and it also requires the sign-off by the Minister for Planning to complete. So it is not just a matter for the council. And so I'm a bit surprised about that statement in the media. So look, that's where it's at. The report sort of says that there was no disclosure by the real estate agents at the time that this was not a residentially zoned land. However, and Tony would be able to tell you what section of the Act it is, but
Section 32.
Section 32, that's right. Section 32 notices will tell you what the land is zoned. So I can only assume that those Section 32 notices had the disclosure of the zone of the land on them. And what were those solicitors doing that were representing those people buying that land, not bringing to the attention of those people that the land was zoned industrial and not residential? So I can understand why this is a very emotional issue for the community and a very tough issue for the council.
So I think that's where we should recognise, I think, really, really difficult situation for council officers, and as we saw on the night, councillors, some very emotional speeches given, and clearly lots and lots of angst from those councillors, being in a position where effectively the decision that they were making meant that individuals would have to lose their, leave their residences. And I believe the genesis for this, can't confirm it, but I believe the genesis for this is what was some correspondence that council received from Environment Protection Authority.
And apparently WorkSafe
Mobile, the adjacent landowner. And look, I've over the years, I think I've actually given some formal and informal advice on this to Hobsons Bay. It's a really difficult issue. As you say, Julie, that the state government have an essential role. In fact, that they have the key role, if you like, the key decision-making role in planning, in rezonings of land. And in this case, the local government minister happens to be the local member, Melissa Horn. It is a power that Sonia Kilkenny, the planning minister, has. But you would think that either the government believes and the planning department believe that this is a necessary decision and that the zoning controls need to be enforced, in which case you'd want them, I think, standing alongside the council, you know, either with statements or actually physically with this decision, or if they don't agree with it, they're indicating that they're receptive to a rezoning, or that they are going to initiate their own, you know, site-specific rezoning process here. It's to me, it would be, you know, an abrogation of responsibility if the state government stepped aside and just said, look, this is one for the local council. In relation to that section 32 of the Sale of Land Act, you're right, the vendor statements require, and have for many, many years in this state, required vendors to provide certain disclosures when land is put on the market for sale. And one of those disclosures is, you know, what planning scheme is the land located within? What are the zoning controls? What zone is it in? You know, the overlays, that sort of thing. What regularly, of course, happens is people sign contracts that have a vendor statement attached before they get legal advice. Not everyone gets legal advice. Many people use conveyances, of course, but then they come to the solicitor and they've entered into a contract and that the first time the solicitor receives the document, we've already got a contract in writing, and any right to withdraw from that contract doesn't exist because the disclosure's been made in the vendor statement. But I suspect that some of these residents simply, some would have taken a risk with knowledge, and others potentially just would have thought, well, this has occurred for the last 30 years. Chances are I'll be able to live in this house and unimpeded, despite the zoning controls. But something has occurred recently which has prompted the council to act, and council, of course, have, as a responsible authority, have an obligation if they're, you know, if someone's health suffered as a result of the proximity to the industrial use, I guess council would have some potential liability. But a really difficult set of circumstances. My heart really goes out to the planning officers and the councillors at Hobsons Bay.
So, Tony, we've lost Julie for the moment. Hopefully she'll be able to join back in shortly. You mentioned a difficult issue for councillors. One councillor said to me offline, I hope they don't mind me paraphrasing, that they were very surprised to discover this community living in that area that they weren't aware of. And I was curious about the way the media reports describe the letter that has been received by the residents from the council as being an eviction notice. Does that ring true for you? Would the council have the power to issue an eviction notice? Surely that rests with the owners of the property.
Yeah, I think that's the colloquial term they've used. Presumably it's like it's a notification that the use that land is being put to currently does not is prohibited under the planning scheme. And this is a difficulty here. We sometimes have scenarios where firstly there are pre-existing uses that predate the zoning control, so they have existing user rights. In this instance, it seems that the zoning control predates the housing or the residential use. So that residential use might have commenced 30 or so years ago, but even at that time, the land was zoned industrial. So there appears not to be those existing user rights. The notice that council would have sent presumably is to say, look, you know, the use you're putting the land, residential use, is prohibited under the planning scheme, and as a responsible authority, they have a duty to enforce the controls, and presumably saying, look, you need to either cease that use within a period of time, or have the land rezoned, which, as you know and have already mentioned and Julie has mentioned, is a long process, a costly process, lots and lots of reports, public consultation, and simply leads to a recommendation to a minister, a planning minister. And if the Department of Planning and the minister's office are indicating they wouldn't be receptive to that sort of request, then it seems that would be a great waste of resources and time, and perhaps give people a false sense of security.
All right, thanks, Tony. Julie's back with us. Sorry we lost you there for a bit, Julie. I think we probably spent enough time on this topic, other than to say that the reporting doesn't really say what happens next. I haven't seen minutes from that meeting yet, but I'm assuming they received that petition and will receive a further report on potential next steps in terms of responding to the issues raised in the petition. So we'll keep an eye on that one. All right, thank you both for your perspectives on that. Here's one that caught my eye this week out of Strathbogie Shire, where the mayor there and the council have raised concerns about, it's another cost shift, the one that I hadn't thought about. Strathbogie, under legislation, is the waterway manager for a section of the Goulburn River, including Lake Ngambie. They're saying it's costing the council up to around $200,000 a year to carry out that function, which is effectively a state function that's been delegated to council. And they're basically saying we're going to give up that role unless it can be better funded by the state. Any surprise here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know much about the Marine Act at all. And apparently this capacity of being waterway manager is given to council here under the Marine Act. It's part of the Goulburn River there, Lake Ngambie. We'd probably, many of us, be aware of it within Strathbogie Shire. And as you say, Laura Binks, the mayor, says about $200,000 a year for patrolling, managing that space, a cost to council. It's a new element of the cost shift that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, same here.
Kudos to Strathbogie Shire. I think this isn't the first time in recent months that they have brought attention to this cost shift.
No, you're right. School crossing supervisors, I think, was another one that they were having a bit to say about.
Yeah. And so obviously they see this as timely. Sonia Kilkenny, the planning minister, also happens to be the minister for outdoor recreation. So it's in sort of her bailiwick, if you like, this issue, and let's be interesting to see any response from state government about any willingness to contribute towards.
Yeah, Julie, they've I noticed they've designed a campaign and some materials and invited community members to take part in that campaign by using pro forma letters, social media posts, etc. Do you think that would be an effective way of getting the minister's attention?
I think so, Chris. I mean, I think when communities start to jump up and down about it, then the minister will be listening, no doubt. They never like to see communities upset with councils or with them. So I think yes, I think it's a very smart idea from the council to raise the awareness, and again put back to the government, remembering all these things that you are cost shifting to us, and at the same time rate capping us. So I think it's really effective use of their sort of advocacy power, and good on them. That's what I say.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that one, and best of luck to Strathbogie with that campaign. Another little bit of Strathbogie news. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago the resignation of D. Andrews. That's David Andrews, former councillor now on Strathbogie Shire. Countback was held this week. There were just two candidates left in the running, a former councillor and rather well-known sort of, I want to say, community activist, Robin Weatherald, who was unsuccessful. The successful candidate was Paul Ayton, who I believe has been the independent chair of the council's Audit and Risk Committee. So, Tony, I'm assuming you can't be a councillor and an independent chair of an Audit and Risk, so there'll be a change there. Yeah.
Presumably he'll step down from that role. Never know, he might become the council's rep on the committee, but he has considerable knowledge already, one would think, of council's operations, and has a pretty extensive banking and finance board type background. So good get, I would think.
Have we heard, I haven't seen any confirmation that he's accepted and completed the eligibility. That would have to have happened by, mid this morning, I think. So assuming that's the case, that's the new councillor of Strathbogie. Julie, the only mayor to ever serve 6 consecutive mayoral terms at Glenelg Shire, has stepped down. This was a week or so ago. We almost missed this one. Anita Rank has said that she can no longer fulfill the role due to a change of employment circumstances. Big loss to that council.
Yeah, very big loss, Chris, and I'm sure that they're feeling it. There's no details around the employment status, what the situation is. I think she used to be a teacher, from what I remember. And look, who knows? Who knows whether there's anything behind this, but maybe it's just the workload is too much, holding down a full-time job and being a councillor. It's very challenging. So maybe simply it is about that. But look, there's been amazing contributions by Councillor Rank over many years, as you suggested. She represented her community with a lot of care and a lot of passion, and was a strong advocate for regional development and tourism. So good on her for what she's achieved in that time there, and no doubt we'll hear what the VEC come up with in terms of the replacement councillor. So what number are we up to now, Chris?
Well, we're up to 46 now, 46 processes to replace councillors in this current term. That's my count. I may have missed one or two along the way. I challenge people to have a look at the list on lgnewsroundup.com and let me know if that's the case. But 46 to me in less than 3 years, it's still sounding like a big number, and it is, isn't it, Tony? And it seems to be getting bigger by the week. And there are some rumblings out there of perhaps 1 or 2 more to come. Now, I'm not drawing a straight line to this next reference, but I did watch the Bullock Shire Council meeting earlier this week, where the council narrowly voted to deny a councillor a leave of absence. Now, on the surface of it, that might sound harsh, but I did go back through the last 6 months or so of meeting minutes. The councillor concerned, Carolyn Stewart, the last meeting she attended was in December of last year. She's had 1 leave of absence, requested another of 6 months from 1st of July through to the end of December. You can imagine all of the reasons that the councillors debated for and against granting that, and they've determined not to grant that leave of absence. We don't know the reasons for the request, other than drawing some inferences from the debate that the councillors had at that meeting. It sounds like there are some health grounds. We'll leave it at that and wait to see what happens next. But Tony, is there a limit on the number of leaves of absences that a councillor can reasonably expect to receive from a council?
No, I don't think there's a limit. There's certainly a requirement that one must get leave of absence for those, I think, 4 consecutive meetings of absence in Victoria under the Act. But no, I don't believe there's a limit to the extent of leave, but one would, you're elected for that 4-year term. If you're largely absent, what one would say, why you're running, why you still want to be a councillor. But really, there's a history. Bullock Shire has granted leave of absences in the past to councillors, and I think for whatever reason in this case, the majority of councillors in a tight decision decided that it wasn't appropriate.
Yeah, the vote was 3-2 and 1 councillor abstained. And of course, the councillor requesting the leave of absence wasn't present at that meeting. We might leave that one there. I suspect we'll hear more about that. I picked up this little story in the news this week where the Tourism Noosa group in Queensland has appointed a new CEO. You might say, why is that of relevance to us? Well, the new CEO of Tourism Noosa is currently the Manager of Economic Development at East Gippsland Shire Council in Victoria, Sharon Regus. So we want to say congratulations to Sharon. And I think she's from Queensland, or has previously worked in Queensland, and is heading back up there. And at this time of year, who can blame her?
Yeah, nice job if you can get it. She's going from the Victorian Riviera, isn't it? You know, Lakes
Yeah.
Entrance and that sort of area.
Mm.
Up to Noosa. I won't draw any conclusions as to where I'd like to be this time of year, but yeah, I think Sharon's got some extensive tourism sector experience already, including in that Queensland area. So it sounds like she's really well qualified for the job, and big loss to East Gippsland Shire.
Yes, I don't know Sharon. Have you come across Sharon, Julie?
No, but she sounds fantastic. So we wish her very well in her adventures. And let's hope she doesn't forget about local government.
Yes, I'm sure she won't. Well done. Good appointment on the sound of it. Now, the VEC electoral reviews are continuing. We mentioned stage 2 was getting underway. There's 8 underway and a further 8 coming in this 2-week period. Ballarat, Greater Bendigo, Horsham, Mildura, Greater Geelong, Greater Shepparton, Warrnambool and Wodonga. I think those preliminary reports are all out. Frankston, Latrobe, Wangaratta and Yarra might have come this week. Glen Ira, Monash, Port Phillip and Stonington coming next week. What we are waiting to hear, Tony, is what happens with those stage 1 reviews, the 12 rural councils. I believe those final reports are sitting with the local government minister at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's timely for these things to be determined in the lead up to, you know, an election year next year, and one would think that there's a definite need for us to resolve these. You know, it's really imperative at the moment, given that councillors, members of the public, are making decisions about running for council, and what does that look like? What are the structures of wards, boundaries, etc.
Yeah, I know some of them are pushing back in their submissions against the notion of single member wards for sound reasons on the surface of it. I'm not sure they have much hope of getting. I mean, the hands are tied very much in terms of what structure is going to be allowed going forward, aren't they, Julie?
Yeah, I think so, Chris. And the government have made it very clear that they are very much interested in that single member ward to mirror the structure of what they've got in state parliament. So look, I think that that's where it's headed. There's already a trend of a number of councils that have single member wards. So it's whether or not they win the argument will be the question. I think it's going to be it's going to have to be a very strong argument to convince the government, I think.
All right, fun times ahead for all of us getting our heads around the new structures that will apply to a lot of those, or most of those councils next year. I wanted to just mention this one in passing and say what a great initiative out at Baw Baw Shire, where they've launched what's called a local sensing network. This is an intelligent network of sensors that's providing a whole range of data on a 24-hour basis. It's up online at www.bawbaw.network. And I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look, but you can just see all this amazing real-time information, which is going to be obviously very valuable in terms of predicting and responding to significant weather events.
Yeah, 7 locations there. Some sort of famous ones like Mount Baw Baw, Alpine Village, Thompson Dam, Taronga Falls. But yeah, these sensors are early detectors for events like bushfires and floods. And Anne-Marie McCabe, the mayor, in a statement said, you know, some of the things that make our area so beautiful, you know, the valleys, the forests, also mean they're quite susceptible to some of these extreme weather conditions. And so this is that early warning. The Deputy Mayor, Michael Leaney, who's no stranger to, you know, remote areas. He lives in Valhalla, right, you know, at one end of the Shire. He said it was it was game changing. So, well done to Mark Dupay, the CEO, and the councillors. And I think this is a state government funded initiative as well.
Partly, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, 24-hour monitoring. And as you say, that live feed will be quite interesting for some of us.
It really is interesting. And Julie, I reckon you can see this being up for some sector technology awards in the future, potentially.
Yes, potentially. Yeah, can I just call out the fact that, 192,000 was granted from Emergency Management Victoria to enable this. Obviously, the council as well have funded this, but, this is the type of project that could be easily rolled out to many of the councils that are experiencing these emergency situations. Let's hope that there is a plan for that to help councils with those early warning systems. It's a great project, and both the council and the government should really be acknowledged for the fantastic work.
It's really fascinating starting to see the uses for some of this technology, the sensors combined with AI, machine learning and modelling. If I can just give a quick plug for an upcoming episode of the Local Government News Roundup, the monthly interview special, I talked to a couple of folks from Townsville City Council in Queensland about a virtual fence that they've erected along a busy road to try and reduce the number of roadkill that is occurring with native wildlife. And it's just fascinating to see these uses of the technology that local governments around the country are putting into play. It's also happening in Tasmania with great effect on reducing the numbers of roadkill. So I think that's great stuff and sector-leading stuff that's happening. All right, Tony, interested in your view on this from a workplace law position. Randwick City Council is getting some attention this week, having determined that all staff must be back in the office 5 days a week from September. The staff are revolting, and by that I mean they're pushing back. And as I say, it's getting some media attention as well. And the council's being accused of being out of step with modern times.
Yeah. Look, I did see this, and it is a challenge. I put my employer hat on. It's a real challenge to deal with this issue now. We had the pandemic's over, and we did have this experience these hybrid work conditions throughout the pandemic, and for some people that really meant a significant positive experience in their lives, and they've wanted to continue that. But there is no essential right for an employee to dictate to the employer the work location. Yes, as an employer, you have some obligation to consider any request from your employee about a change of work hours and work conditions, and can you reasonably accommodate that within the workplace. But it would seem that in the case of Randwick, this is an inner city council, about 6-7 k's from the CBD. So we know our business districts are struggling, particularly hospitality and retail, without having that workforce there daily. There may be that may be one issue that the council administration has considered. Also, just culturally, maybe having people together physically more often might be something that they see as being critical. I know in my own workplace, we still allow people to work certain parts of their week from home, but we want them to work the majority of their time physically in the office, so we're all sort of proximate and engaging with each other. But so I dare say, if there is an avenue for legal challenge, it will be taken by either by the union or by one of the employees at this organisation, and that will be really followed by the rest of the sector, watch closely and perhaps acted upon.
Perhaps another outcome, it's been suggested that some of those staff members will simply move to other councils. We know that qualified workers and skilled workers are in great demand right across the sector. Does that hold sway with you, that argument, Julie?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Chris, is that there will be an impact on them if they take the hard line, because there are councils around them that are providing more flexibility. And there has been apparently an anonymous email sent to the Sydney Morning Herald that basically says that, working from home arrangements have been sort of welcomed, and that, to call women back in particular, back into the workforce, who bear the majority of care work responsibilities, there's an argument from a gender point of view that this is going to impact on women in particular. So it'll be interesting to see how this one rolls out, whether there are some actions that are taken against the council in relation to this, or whether they'll find a trend of women potentially departing from their council because of what is being seen as being, potentially gender bias. So interesting argument there, and one to watch in terms of what other councils maybe in that area do. Are they all going to follow if this one goes through and it does happen, or will they hold the ground and will they allow that flexibility for staff? I can understand Tony's arguments in the legal position, but there is this other side of things in terms of staff desires, health and well-being, demands of life, etc., that need to be considered.
Yes, and some of those other councils have confirmed that they are maintaining those hybrid working arrangements. Another angle for this, guys, is it's obviously an operational decision, rests with the CEO. I know New South Wales, the system is slightly different with some of the things that the council has oversight of. The Deputy Mayor, since this Sydney Morning Herald story has been released, has been on Sydney radio, I believe, quite strongly arguing against the decision to bring all staff back into the office. So I suspect we might hear some more on that as perhaps the council tries to make some comment or influence over what happens. All right, let's look at our picks of the week before we wrap this up. And Tony, you picked one that caught my eye as well. This is absolutely fascinating in Dubbo in New South Wales, where this week they've pushed the button on 3D printing a new toilet block. And the mayor has even had to put out a request for people to obey traffic management arrangements, such as the interest in seeing this block appear out of nowhere.
I think the mayor said, look, in hindsight, if we could have sold tickets to, for spectators, we would have. But there's a really interesting video that we might put in the show notes, ABC News, that shows the actual printing of the walls on site, and you watch the gradual growth of this. What is an amenities block, a toilet block in Dubbo. So there's a gantry that is brought onto the site, and that prints in a 3D way the external structure of the building. There are some advantages with this. That it's a much faster construction process, and would appear to even be a more affordable process as well for council. And I understand this is the first in Australia, the use of this type of method of construction, at least by a council. It'll be really interesting to hear if any Victorian councils have plans to do this, and let us know. We'd love to cover it.
I think at the very least, Tony, they'll be watching with great interest.
Yeah, I understand what's driving this is that Dubbo Council have aspirations to set aside part of their new housing releases for quick build, 3D build of residences. And of course, people are, people are unaware of these, haven't seen these 3D structures in the past. So there might be a bit of wariness, and they thought, well, let's construct this amenities block in this fashion. People can see that it's solid, can see how the construction works, and can see that it is an alternative. And yeah, with just an amazing set of vision when you watching these walls come out, the concrete walls. My old dad, who was a concreter, would turn his grave seeing how it works, but just amazing.
It sure is. And Tony, you missed the opportunity there to point out that the ABC, in true Australian style, have called it the 3D printed dunny. And here we are saying amenities blocks and the toilet block, but it's a 3D printed dunny. And I want to add anything there, Julie?
Oh gosh, you wouldn't get that in the UK, would you?
No, you wouldn't. No. Your pick, Julie, this week is from the UK, though, and another
Yeah.
in this disturbing trend of
Oh,
councils that are putting up their hand and say, look, we're in serious financial trouble.
I know, Chris. They're just dropping like flies at the moment, one after the next, after the next. So the latest one is Southampton City Council. They've warned the government that it may run out of money this year. So they're spending beyond its means and may exhaust all of their reserves. So this is a pretty serious situation that they're in. The leader of the council has come out and said that they've got a robust recovery plan and would not need government funds, but then they're saying to the government, help, we're going to go broke. So they are in risk of financial failure. They're in a desperate situation from what I can see. They've got a chartered institute accountancy commissioned to come in and have a look at the detail of their budgets. I just find this interesting because you've got people that work at the council that have this kind of specialty skills, and yet they've still got to bring in other people to have a look at what's going on with their finances. So it's really interesting. There's been a culture there, I think, that overspends. And so, this is really concerning,
I noticed, Julie, that I know that it's a more political environment at the local level in the UK, and that the leader of the council, who I'm guessing is on a different side of politics to the government, is actually saying it's the government's fault for the way they've handled the economy that they find themselves in this position.
That's right, Chris. And it is very political over there. There's no doubt that everybody works in their political parties. It's very different to the way it works here. And you're correct. That's what they're saying. It's the mishandling of the economy. But look, again, it's something that we need to keep an eye on. We've seen the struggles in New South Wales. I've still got a lot of CEOs in councils in Victoria that are talking about the difficulties, the financial, forecasts that don't look great for Victorian councils. We need to start thinking about, what are some of those solutions going forward for some of those councils, because we could very quickly find ourselves in a similar situation. So not something that we want.
Yeah, while I think of that, you reminded me, Julie, we've published this week on VLGA Connect a new episode of Local Leaders with Rebecca McKenzie, the CEO at Glen Ira, and we talk about just that topic because Rebecca's got some significant UK experience. So what can we learn from that? What is that manifesting like in Glen Ira with their budget decisions? Check that out on the YouTube channel now. It's had a lot of interest in the first couple of days up on the YouTube channel. Another council in UK that's hard on the heels of that is Hastings Council, that is also apparently warning of such issues with people in temporary accommodation that they're on the brink of bankruptcy. And the Local Government Association has produced a report that the BBC has seen and says contains concerns that those councillors there are not facing reality. So it seems like another week, another UK council on the brink of serious trouble. So
I think you can't spend money that you don't have. If you don't have it, you got to borrow it to spend it. And there's a basic formula or basic principle there, if you like, that as you say, in the UK, we have, I think we have some extremes of politics. And I think the former council at Southampton came out and said, we were very astute, we were very careful, we left you with reserves, and it swung to a more activist council that wanted to spend more money, and they've ended up in this apparent edge of bankruptcy situation. So I think we've got some good controls here in terms of our 10-year planning that we do in Victoria, our audit and risk committee processes and such, but there is an underlying issue with that cost shift. So I don't think we're seeing councils saying we've spent all our money, we're going to go broke, in that we have liabilities that are higher than we can meet. But there's increasingly, a reduction in the areas that we can cover, the money's spread more thinly, because the responsibilities seem to grow, and the pipeline of revenue seems to become less.
All right. Just before we wrap up, one quick pick from me. I did feature this on the Local Government News Roundup edition this week. Some statistics out of Canada. This is a topic we talk about here about what is the cost of CEO turnover. Particularly, we watch the Victorian sector very closely. This report's come out that's crunched numbers over the last 6 months just in the province of British Columbia in Canada, with 13 different municipal CAOs, they call them, Chief Administrative Officers, but that's the equivalent of a CEO or general manager here in Australia. 13 have been fired or resigned or retired over clashes with or conflict with a new mayor or a new council. And they've estimated that about $20 million has been spent getting rid of those CAOs or fighting wrongful dismissal lawsuits. At some point, it's got to be very difficult for those councils, those mayors, to justify the cost of those turnovers.
Yeah,
Tony?
one would think that in a state like Victoria, the ratepayers, the voters, would take to task a council that, threw away some, large amounts of money on severance pay arrangements. I think we're talking here in British Columbia about hundreds of thousands of dollars in each instance.
One very recent example of a $300,000 offer to vacate the post because the council doesn't want that person in the role anymore. They perceive them as hostile.
Well, there's a whole toilet amenities block from there, isn't there?
There is. You're right. All right. So check that out. That story's from CBC, the network in Canada. All right. That's pretty much all we have. Any final thoughts from you, Julie, firstly?
No, Chris, just wishing everyone a good weekend.
And Tony?
Yeah, they're going to be a nice, pleasant weekend. I'll hit the road off to Hepburn Springs tonight and get to enjoy the cold in front of the fireplace, but it'd be nice.
Very nice. Enjoy that. Look out for, I mentioned the Local Leaders series on VLGA Connect, a new episode coming this week where I speak with the Mayor, Tina Samagia from the city of Monash. I hope you'll enjoy that conversation. And we'll, of course, be back again next week with more from TGU, brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, the flagship program from VLGA Connect, available on YouTube and on your podcast player. Until next time, bye for now.